Hey, you have reached Litvak Leadership Live for July 31st, 2023. It's our 201st episode tonight. I have I would say good friend, but we don't know each other well, but we kind of bounce off each other on social media. Harry Spaight with me, author of Selling with Dignity. Harry, how you doing tonight?
Soon to be great friends, Sean, after this. By the time we get through this, we'll be great friends. I'm doing
I
great. Good to
love
be
that.
here.
So, Harry, before I ask you the question that I ask everybody when we start, I want to ask you, what was your catalyst of writing your book, Selling with Dignity? What was the catalyst? What got you started?
It was a message from God, if you will, Sean. I was sitting
Okay.
at my patio and staring off into space. And then I got this calling, the voice, and said, you know what? Write the book that I've been thinking about for years. So I immediately started writing. There was no wasting time this time.
That is incredible. I don't know if you know this about me, but I had started my book back in 2011 and struggled for 6 or 7 years with it. And I was praying about it. And I asked God, what should I be doing? And God's answer to me was, if you write this book, I will take care of everything 5 times over. So that got me started and moving quickly on the book, but it still took me about 2 years. How long did it take you to write your book?
I used crayons and magic markers, so it was only 9 months. Very big fonts, lots of white space. But yes, I was
Lots
done
of
in
like,
9 months.
that is amazing. Randy Chafee. Randy's got a book coming out. Good to see you here this evening, Randy. So, Harry, we begin almost every show the same way. I ask everyone the same question. What does Matthew 6:33, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be given to you, have to do, and we're going to change it up a little bit, with selling with dignity?
Yeah, very simply, I believe if you put the right things first in your life, then good
Mm-hmm.
things are going to happen. So, being a person of faith, I believe that if you work hard and do what you should be doing in life, then you're not going to live in a box under a bridge.
You're not going to live in a what?
Live in a box under a bridge.
Yeah, well, nobody wants to be there, even the people living in the boxes
Yes.
under the bridge. So you began before you were in sales, as I understand it, and before you were a sales trainer and a speaker, you were in the mission field, which is why on my thumbnail I put mission principles. I forgot exactly how is it? Mission field principles for business.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about being on the mission field and what moved you into sales training.
Okay. So in the mission field, the honest thing is my wife and I were fairly adventurous, mostly me.
Okay.
So we were on the beach one year in the Bahamas and we were living rather close to the poverty line because we were doing mission work. So we had friends that took us to the Bahamas. And I threw out this line, wouldn't it be great if we could do this in a tropical, if we could do our mission work in a tropical island? And she said, oh, yeah, it'd be great. Well, 6 months later, we had one-way tickets to the Dominican Republic. So she was
Okay.
thrilled. I think she was crying the first few nights. But other than that, we got past all that. And after a couple of years, she threw out the line, are we ever going to have kids? And that's what got me to thinking about a career where I could support a family. And so I took my communication skills and my hard work ethic and brought that into corporate America with a lot of trials and tribulation, but finally
Right.
made it and succeeded and built a nice career. And that led me after 25 years to decide to write and help others who may not have had sales coaching in their life that want to be better so they can grow their business.
Well, sure. Sales coaching back in the day was, here's a phone book, start with the letter A, start making phone calls.
Yeah, pretty much.
And whether it was yellow pages for business to business or white pages for business to consumer. So tell me, when you were on the mission field, what kind of skills did you pick up that can be applied to sales?
Oh, everything. So basically the entire book I have is based on things I learned in the mission field. So my real training came
Okay.
from mindset, being kind to others, putting the right things first, servant mindedness, being a good listener, recognizing that there's still joy and fun and laughter in life, in spite of, you might take your job or your work seriously, but you still got to you still should have some fun and laughter. You need to persist. Right. You need to be patient and, think of the fruits of the spirit. So all these traits that I've been around for years, Sean, I was now in corporate and I was basically taught you got to close, always be closing. And I went, that's not me. And after many months of failing, I realized that I could be myself and start really applying the things I had known for years and apply it to
Right.
selling. And that's where my career started to take off.
So in your book, you talk about so many things. I was just looking at the chapters. So tell us, let's talk about finding your voice. I know for me, in my personal journey, finding my voice is something that truly, until this past weekend, I thought I had really found as I have grown in sales and in leadership, that I thought that how you speak and the motivation of how you speak, makes an impact. Obviously, it's not just your words, it's your tone. But it was brought up to me this past weekend that I can speak rather emphatically. And my kids have always joked about it, that they're like, Dad, even when you don't know the answer, the way you answer that you don't know the answer sounds like you're telling someone what the answer is. And I think I've overleaned into that I need to back off a little bit and soften my tone. When you talk in your book about finding your voice, what is the experience you're encouraging people to have?
Well, I'm really encouraging people to be natural, to be who they are, that we all have our audience. I think people compare, and I used to compare myself a lot, and we don't really need to do that. We don't all need to be Tony Robbins, but people will be drawn to us based on our sincerity, our genuineness, authenticity, if you will, whatever the word is of your choice. And
Right.
just speak, you have the experience, right? Whoever it is that's listening, you have the experience. You know more about what you do than a lot of other people who are looking in from at what you do, and they're there to hear your insights. So we hold back way too often, and people want to hear what we have to say. So I've really embraced that. And, we have a lot to offer this world, so let's do it.
As someone who's been in sales for a long time, like yourself, I've been through different trainings, and selling with dignity, or Larry Levine's selling from the heart, really talk about being your genuine self, as opposed to so much of the sales training where people are encouraged to get the prospect, get the buyer to agree with different things that you say as a salesperson, ending your sentences with, wouldn't you agree? Doesn't that make sense? Do you hear what I'm saying? So when you look at that from sales, there's a fine line between being genuine but guiding the conversation. My friend Eric Bam says a buyer buys when they're ready to buy. You can't control when someone's going to buy. many sales gurus would disagree with that. Eric's very successful with how he does things, so I know he lives by that. How would you recommend to people to find their voice, be genuine, while at the same time moving the conversation along?
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. I appreciate what you said about Eric. I totally agree. If you use guilt and manipulation and get people to buy, maybe the sale sticks, maybe it doesn't, but they're not feeling good about it. And will you get a referral? Some people just don't care. That's their choice. But I want people to feel great about the sale and buy again from me. Right. So I don't want people ghosting me and say that guy's pushy, he's obnoxious. I don't want any of that. I just want to serve people. When they're ready to buy, they'll buy. So the simple thing, if anyone is questioning, you have to ask for the business. You have to ask for next steps.
You got to do the big ask.
You've got to, right? In the book, I compare it to my favorite two little boys that came around in shine shoes. They came around pretty much every day and asked me if I wanted to have my shoes shined. And they didn't mind asking, right? I didn't say yes every day. The word no didn't discourage them, and they just kept making the ask. The problem with many who are servant-minded, they never make the ask. And people don't know that you want the business. So you have to make the ask. Right. Talk to me.
Well, and you have to make the ask at the right time. I mean, every single sales meeting, or really every single business meeting, every single ministry meeting, every single association meeting, in my opinion, the purpose of it is either to come to culmination of what you're discussing or to schedule the next meeting for greater understanding, greater depth of analysis. I mean, so often when I bring operators with me to a sales meeting, they look at me and they say, what's the purpose of this meeting? And truly, if it's in the first 5 meetings, my answer is always the same: to get to the next meeting. Yeah. If we leave this meeting with the next meeting booked and, something we're supposed to do or something they're supposed to do, and we have a set date to do it, a set date to meet and review it, this has been a successful meeting. When do you think, and I'm in an industry where it's not a one-call close. The average sales time for a project can be anywhere from as short as 45 days to as long as a year. When do you think people should start asking for the business, asking for, the ultimate purpose of why they're together?
Okay, so just to understand the question, you mean ask for the order or ask for like the next step?
I think it's a matter of, you don't necessarily ask for the order when you know that there is more information that needs to be provided or there's more process, but asking for agreement without sounding salesy.
Yeah. Well, like depending on where you are in the sale, but in the very beginning, say it's your first meeting, like you said, your goal should be to get to the next meeting. And so as you're drawing to this conclusion, this is a problem too, that a lot of coaches and people who are selling higher ticket items, they try to close. They feel like they hear this in their, whatever, Hollywood, wherever, always be closing. And they try to close significant dollar deals on the first conversation. And I look at that and it's like, I don't even know you. And you're asking for 10 grand, 5 grand. I'm not going to give that based on one conversation. That's right. And I think a lot of people are like that. So you have to you have to go in with a reasonable mind as to how many conversations you need. And everybody's different. Some may say, well, this is awesome. I need you. A really great connection. But then you might want to consider slowing it down a little bit to see how sincere they are on the next conversation. So there's a lot going on in sales, but I always think about, what's reasonable, how to get the next step, make sure there's a good feeling. It's like, so you ask things like, what's your feeling about our conversation today?
Right.
Ask questions
What's
like
your
that.
feeling about it?
Yeah.
And so I'm one that tells people that feelings lie. So
Yeah.
how would you coach me if I'm someone that says I don't want to talk about feelings, I want to talk about beliefs? Am I wrong?
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything's wrong if it works, right? And some people, nothing in my world is really wrong. It's just that what's comfortable for some isn't necessarily comfortable for others. But people, like, I'm a big believer in comments like, the name escapes me, very famous poet. She says, people don't remember what you say, they remember how you make them feel.
Exactly.
Right.
That is a famous comment.
Right. I'm an empathic person. I have feelings. So I use the word feeling probably a lot more than others who are more analytical. So when
I've never been accused of having great empathy, probably hence why I use the word believe instead of feelings.
Well, it's interesting because I used to say I didn't like the word believe because belief could be misleading. So I would say convinced. But even that, it's like I think you have to find the words that you're comfortable with. And if they work for you, then that's okay. But I wouldn't lose any sleep over it if it's working.
Absolutely. And, my way of selling is different than others. I see myself as a consultant and being brutally honest. I was in a meeting recently where, as we were talking, myself and the operator with the soon-to-be customer, and they were telling me that their number one priority and how they were going to make the decision was price. I told him, we may not be a good fit for you because we are not your low-cost provider. Yep. I'm like, so if quality isn't going to be more important than price, that you're not going to realize what you're paying for, this may not be a good fit for us to continue the meeting. And I stopped right there. And the guy looked at me, he's like, what do you mean? and I told him, I said, well, the service you provide, I know is not the low-cost provider for our community. He's like, no, not at all. I go, so why would you make a decision based on price? Now, we danced around that whole bush of price, but he knew at that point I had set the expectation that we were going to be mid-range, hopefully, not the highest. No, you never want to be highest, in my opinion. But I think it's important to bring that out instantly, or initially, that you're not going to be low unless you are the low cost provider. Would you say talking about price in the beginning is part of selling with dignity?
Yeah, it depends on where and what you're selling. But if someone's in the shopping mode, and it's like the elephant in the room, right? So if they're already shopping and comparing, they want to know where you fit in, what's your price, and you want to understand. I just don't shoot out numbers. I want to understand exactly what they need. But I totally agree with what you said, is that when people are saying this is all about price, just say then, I'm probably not for you. And maybe we don't want to have the conversation anymore. I love that, because you're calling them out. If they're really going to buy on price, you don't want them as a customer. Unless you're the low-cost provider.
They'll fire you on price too.
Yeah, and they're going to be squeaky wheels. If you're selling something that's consultative and they're saying they're buying on price, that's a major disconnect. Right? So,
and it's like
the way I would
Eric
look at
Bam, Eric Bam, who was here, may still be here. He sells bumpy paper. He sells perfect crust pizza liners. And I know for a fact that perfect crust pizza liners cost more than corrugated cardboard or wax paper, which is what many companies, pizzerias use, or nothing underneath the pizza. And that's why there's, an oily mess underneath the pizza on the cardboard coffin. So Eric for sure has to deal with the price issue, and I want to talk about this a little bit more, Harry, because with the way people are looking at the economy, I think it's booming. Some people say we're going to go, or at least the radio says, oh, recession's going to happen at any time. I think the economy's booming. How do you deal with price when selling with dignity? What are your suggestions?
Well, I really try to, there's something I learned from either Tom Hopkins or Brian Tracy 100 years ago, which was minimize it. And if you take the gap when you're having a conversation and someone is saying you're more, whatever, and if you can get an idea as to how much more, and then just extrapolate that over the course of the time that they're going to be using your product, and then show this is really pennies. And for the pennies, what do you get in return? Now, if I get a pizza that is a mess versus I open up a box and it's like perfect inside, I'm going to get the perfect pizza again. So
kind of like a pizza from Paulie G's in Brooklyn. That would be a perfect pizza.
See, we want that.
Yeah, that's exactly what we want.
Yeah. So some will pay more for that. And then again, others don't care, but are you losing some repeat client potential based on a few pennies? And if you can show the value of what you're offering, that it's more, and with technology, it was uptime. If you're selling something that is going to impact the uptime of the person's core business, they don't want downtime. And if you can show, what is one little incident every 2 or 3 months going to cost them versus being up, things like that. So yeah, I've sold more costly products and solutions for many years. And that's how I approached it.
One of the things you talk about in your book, you have an entire chapter dedicated to it. And I bring it up throughout my book. So there's a chapter in Selling with Dignity devoted to what I'm about to talk about. And I talk in Proverbs for Leadership about this topic also. I am fond of saying we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And, God made us that way for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we talk. And anyone who knows me is probably laughing hysterically that this is something I say, because I have been known to talk too much. But when you're in a business meeting, and it's taken me years to get to this point, the salesperson should be doing less of the talking. When you get away from describing your product or service, there should be the right questions asked to really draw out the prospect. And I think it's biblical to do that, to discover what they want.
Agreed. Yeah. In fact, most salespeople talk way more than half the time. And really, there's data out there from Gong, which says that like the top performers speak a little less than 50% of the time. But it really comes down, and it's hard to measure, right? What really matters is, are you asking questions and understanding the prospect? Are they speaking and telling you their story? Or are you assuming you know everything because you've dealt with people like that before? And I've made those mistakes. We want to hear what people have to say, and then we will stand out in sales, because most salespeople do the majority of talking and they'll do discovery questions, but they won't ask about their business. What challenges are you facing in your business? What's the priority you're working on? How can maybe someone in my network I could refer to you, instead of, this is my product, this is my service, let me tell you about this. Oh, we're number one, our company's been around the longest, right? Exactly. That's just, nobody wants to hear that stuff anymore. Thoughts? What do you think?
Not at all. So how do you think this applies to coaching individuals, either in business leadership, sales leadership, operational leadership, or even when you're heading up an association of some kind? How does the principles outlined in Selling with Dignity apply to that?
Well, it's pretty simple. It's the same thing in your book, Sean. It's all about the way you treat people. And if you really value the people that are working with you, you give them the opportunity to speak and share their ideas, and you don't judge them. You make it a safe place. So an example would be is like, if we're servant minded, which I know your book talks about this, same is true in sales. You can sell coming from a place of service. If you're a leader, you should not be thinking that I have followers. You should be thinking I serve my internal clients. My direct reports get my service. I don't expect them to serve me. And when you go in with that approach, just like the master did, the master on the Sermon on the Mount, that person, right. I believe you give people respect. They will want to work for you and be around with you for a long time, and you will get things done.
Oh, I have learned throughout my career that it is so important to give others the opportunity to hold the leadership staff, to lead the meeting, and to raise them up, give them the opportunity to shine. Because when you have a team of individuals that is succeeding, well, you're their leader. So naturally, you have succeeded. But even today, in our gentler, more sensitive, feeling-focused world, I think that's about the nicest way I can say it, there's still a lot of push down from leadership from the top, and that's not dignity at all. What say you, Harry?
Yeah, it's total. I would say that's disrespectful. That's leading with an iron fist, which nobody wants. So I encourage people to follow someone like Simon Sinek and others who are servant minded.
I love
and again, you can prosper. I don't get why people want authority and power. And the world is a very big place. And if you say, well, I manage a team, so I'm somebody, you need to think bigger and serve the people that are working underneath you, and you will find a much better place to be than thinking that you're the top dog managing 10 people in a world of 7 billion.
What would you say is the number one principle you brought from the mission field into the sales world?
Yeah, it's always about putting others first. Put others over you, right? Just serve 100%. I mean, I've always thought about Jesus washing the feet of his disciples, the disgusting, gross feet in the dry area of the Middle East. And he just was willing to do that as a leader. Just like, what are we doing, right? And we expect, some leaders expect complete, what is the word I'm looking for? Where they are, everyone is supposed to respect them just because they're in the position. No, earn the respect and serve others and do like Jesus did, and you'll be in a better place. And so won't the company. What thoughts?
So it's interesting when you look at the shift in business over the years. It used to be you do something because your boss said to do it, and that had its own level of dignity for the team, that you were allowing your boss to direct you. Now there is a whole lot more conversation, and there is a greater sensitivity to the needs of the team. How can a boss, probably shouldn't even use the word boss, how can a leader of a team lead with dignity to meet the objectives of the business, but at the same time be sensitive to the needs of the individuals on his or her team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always looked at it as make it the team's idea. So if we're whatever the position is, I used to manage sales teams and so forth, and people over me said we need to be doing this. So I'd go back to the team. I learned, right? And I would say, well, we're being told we need to do
Right.
this, right? Which then I realized that didn't go fly very well. So I said, okay, so we've got some new challenges. Let's put our heads together and see what ideas we could come up with so that we could sell more of this or whatever, right? Whatever that initiative was, it's like, let's put our heads together and see, can we come up with some ideas about this? When someone hit the chord, right? When they nailed it, that's say, that's a great idea. What do you guys think? Then people would buy in. And so then it becomes their idea versus, hey, this is what corporate's saying, and we're going to do it because we're number one, we're the top dogs. And people are like, what? I don't want to do that. Get them to buy in with their idea, and it's a whole new world. Then you just kind of sit back and watch and just kind of coach a little bit. Thoughts?
What is the number one attribute that a leader of a team should have, in your opinion?
Well, other than serving others, you got to have vision, right? Vision is important. And, just being able to look at the big picture and recognize that some days aren't going to be great. Some people are going to have bad days. And you just look at the big picture on everything and say, this person is really great. They're having a bad day. They snapped. Doesn't mean the end of the world. Or maybe this project isn't going as well. Look at the big picture and just keep reminding people that there's a bigger purpose behind. Find out their why. And when you're discerning and helpful along those lines, a big picture guy or gal, I think that's really the trait that I look for. Thoughts? What do you think?
When different businesses are having special days recognizing different segments of society, whether it be, I don't know, just different segments of society that say are more on the liberal side, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's in Chicago, there's Roman Polanski Day, a Polish revolutionary hero. There's different businesses that allow those who are Muslim to have their daily prayers throughout the day. Do you think that part of selling with dignity or business in general with dignity would be allowing people's faith to be more exhibited in the business community?
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with it as long as people get their work done. Where,
Absolutely.
People have had different views for, as long as there's been business. And really ultimately is like when you show up at the job, if you're an employee, you have a job to do. If you're expecting to get paid and make your own holiday, then and it's not a holiday for the employer, I think you have to re-examine that. And maybe you start your own business and say, I want my own holidays and do things. But if you're getting paid from somebody else, you really should be doing the work that they're asking you to do. And if you want to put a little, whatever it is in your cubicle, but if you're using your job to proselytize and preach to others your beliefs, regardless of your religion, I don't think that's right, because that's not what you were hired for. But, you do have the respect to have conversation.
I was I was raised Jewish, was going to go to rabbinic school at one point, and while I was still a practicing Jew, after I graduated college, I was a waiter for a period of time, and the restaurant I was working at was open on Christmas Day. Um, they didn't ask me if it would be okay for me to work on Christmas. They assigned it to me because they knew I was Jewish, so it shouldn't be an issue. And you know what? I had no problem with that because I took Rosh Hashanah off of work. So, the door swings both ways.
Yeah.
I think people need to realize that, to have everyone get along and to have dignity at business, we need to recognize the various beliefs, the various things that are important to different individuals, and not just focus on specific sets within society.
Exactly. And, again, as an employee, you have to make decisions as to where you want to work. And some small businesses, that stuff is not going to matter. And you might be talking to the wall, trying to get them to change. It's not, don't expect to move mountains. If that's not their culture, then find a company that is more in line with what you want the culture to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what would you say is the number one lesson that people, when they read through your book, that they should take away from it? If you can distill it down to one sentence, what is that lesson?
Selling from a place of service to others works.
You've been asked this question before. I will tell you, I think, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's really that simple. And I mean, if I was or if I wasn't, that's the book in a nutshell. Everything is about being servant minded. Everything, every conversation. How do I serve the person in front of me? And when you think like that, and same is true as an employer. If someone comes to you with a problem, don't think about, well, I'm going to fire this person. Maybe that needs to be the case, but how can you serve the person? And maybe setting them free is serving them. But when you go in thinking like that, Sean, your whole demeanor changes.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Okay, fun question. Tell me about the hands on the cover.
Yeah, it's a spiritual bend to selling. I believe that sales and selling from a place of service is a spiritual thing. It's a spiritual act. And so that's why the hands are more spiritual looking than just the regular handshake. So when I saw the artist's rendition of that, I actually teared up. I said, man, did she nail what this book is about? So that's why that one won the cover. Yeah.
That's great. I love that. So, Harry, we have been going on now for almost 40 minutes. You have been lively and done well with my left field questions, so I compliment you on that. Everyone, the book is Selling with Dignity from Harry Spaight. You can go to sellingwithdignity.com. And I'm sure they can get copies of the book there. I know the book is also available on Amazon, as is every book in the world. Check it out. There's a lot of good stuff there. Harry, final word to the viewers and those on replay. What do you have to leave them with?
Yeah, if you're in sales and you're struggling and people are ghosting you, rethink how you're approaching people. If you're having problems, think about serving and see what you can do for those people. Maybe it's send an article, say you were thinking of them, share something non-sales related, see if you can stir the pot and get them going again. But it's not always about you.
Absolutely. And we're having some internet issues. So without any further ado, check it out, people. We will be back next week. Thank you so much for being my guest, Harry.